Hey guys, welcome back. I have finally got my voice back. But in today's video, I'm going to be showing how I draw a couple of different hairstyles. First, I like to set down a foundation or a rough outline of how the hair's shape will be. Then I'll draw the strands of the hair, and lastly, how I shade each different one. The shape that I am drawing currently is based off of this picture, and this hairstyle I kind of call like an apple-shaped haircut, but this is the general outline for it and how I think of drawing the shape. As for this next one, I call this one a heart shape. I think it's really cute. This shape is also based off of a picture, and this is the picture, but getting the general outline down for your hairstyles I think is really important. And the shapes are different based off of the hair texture, type, and style, so I think it's important to try to break down things into shapes. This next one, it's more of a long and layered hairstyle, or like stretched curly hair, if that makes sense. And I drew this one based off of this picture. So having some kind of picture to get a general idea is a good idea if you're looking for a certain type of hairstyle. But that's pretty much the outlines for each of them. And then from there, I like to add in some curls just all the way around the outline that I made. And this is pretty much how I do it. That's what they look like. But you can kind of play around with how curly you want the curls to look, how wispy or coily. For this one, I did more of a sort of wispy curl look, but I just add them all the way around like this. And then I add in some front pieces, just some face framing front pieces. And from there, I start to kind of draw lines and shade basically to map out where the hair will be darker in the back. There tends to be a shadow around like the neck area when hair is down, so I'm just making sure to show that. And then I add in some curls in front of the shadow just to show that they're in front. Now I'm adding some more lines to indicate another layer of the hair that sits on top of the bottom layer, and I shade underneath that. From there, I like to add in these little pencil strokes for the roots, and then I erase the guide so I can see what I'm doing basically. And I add in some hair for the roots. For this next one, I ended up doing the same exact thing. I just kind of lightly erased the sketch, and I decided to go for more of a coily look when it comes to the curl shape. And I feel like that worked really well, and I think it looked really cute with this haircut. This haircut tends to have like a lot of layers, so I tried to make sure to make it look like that, especially at the top. But here I am just kind of shading again around the neck, and basically where the shadow of the hair would be. Erasing the guide again. But yeah, that's pretty much how I do the curls, and then I'm gonna show the same thing but sped up for the longer layered haircut. After that, I like to add in some little baby hairs. It's more of a personal choice, but I feel like it just adds a little extra touch, but completely optional. Now I'm going ahead and starting the shading. So there are two different ways that I kind of will show the shading for the curly hair. So you kind of shade where the hair kind of bends inward, and then the areas where it does not, I leave blank so that it gives more of a highlight effect. But I basically just kind of find those areas on the hair that are kind of bowing inward, and then I'll shade darker there. And then as I become more content with where I've shaded, I'll darken some areas and basically keep darkening things to create dimension within those same areas that I've already shaded. Again, don't forget to shade underneath the layers that you create. But that's pretty much how it turned out. I really like how it looks. That way of shading kind of gives more of a shinier look. But now we're on the next drawing. The next drawing, I kind of went with more of a simple way of shading. So instead of shading in the areas that bow inward, I sort of just lightly shaded everything. And that way it kind of gave more of a matte look opposed to more of a shiny look compared to the other hairstyle. And here I'm just adding in a little bit more detail in darker areas on this last hairstyle. So those are the two ways that I kind of shade those hairstyles. And now we're gonna kind of go into a different hair type. So instead of curly hair, we're gonna go to straight hair. So straight hair, the gravity kind of goes down, so the hair kind of won't stick outward and gradually go down. So that's just kind of something to keep in mind. For this straight hairstyle, I didn't go for something that was completely straight. As you can kind of see, I'm adding in some curves to the hair. This kind of makes the hair look a little bit different. And for straight hair, I try to focus on how the ends of the hair look, how they might curl in or might be blunt cut, for example. But this is pretty much the outline, the rough outline that I have. I also decided to add in a bang for this hair, and I feel like I could have executed a little bit better, but for the outline for the bang, it's essentially a tent or kind of like a house shape with two sharp pieces on the sides. And then the line coming out the top is basically just where the hair parts. So on top of the outline, I kind of just wanted to shape out the hair a little bit more and just give it more volume. So I added in these sort of stray pieces of hair. I always try to think of hair in pieces or chunks compared to just individual pieces of hair. For this bang, I decided to add in a little gap. That's kind of how I draw the bangs. I just add multiple gaps, and if I feel like they look good, I'll keep them, and if I feel like they don't, then I won't keep them. But yeah, and then in the middle of this bang, I ended up creating a part. I guess it's called curtain bangs. As for shading this hair, I essentially use the same technique as the first curly hair that I shaded, but there's also another one that I will be showing in the next hair. Again, I just shaded this one with pencil strokes in the areas where the shadow would be and where the hair kind of bows inward versus out. When it comes to shading, besides what I mentioned of where to shade, where the sun doesn't hit, shading can kind of be more of a stylistic choice. So the way you shade and the pencil strokes, like the direction of them, can kind of be a little bit more stylized if that's what you like. I personally try to imagine which way that the hair is flowing, and then based off of that, I'll create my pencil strokes. But if you're ever unsure, you can look at a reference of something that you're trying to achieve. So yeah, for this other hair, I had drawn a hairstyle and I didn't really like how it came out, but this one I changed to a kind of a blunt cut bob shape, and I'm pretty much working on the outline of it. And this is how I kind of think of the ends, that little diagram that I drew. So they're like kind of like sharp triangular pieces almost. And then here I am outlining it. So the outward triangle pieces are kind of like just more layers essentially. And for this shading with this hair, I decided to use the flat brush instead of the pencil strokes just to kind of demonstrate how that would look. Because sometimes I like to use the flat default brush. And usually I find myself using it more often on a hairstyle like this, more straight, blunt cut hairstyles. And that's just because the way the brush works and the shape of it is a rectangle, so for creating the hair strokes and everything, it works a little bit better for straighter styles. But I have experimented with using it for curly hair. It turned out decent, but I think I really like the way this specific brush looks for straight hair. But now I'm just going ahead and adding in some straight hairs. These straight hairs kind of just make the hair look more alive and give it movement. So they're definitely one of my more favorite things to draw, just in terms of finishing touches for drawings. Now we're on the next one. So this hairstyle is a little bit more complex, mainly because it's locks. So for locks or braids, you kind of have to draw this grid on the head, or like these squares, and try to make them around the same size. Once you have your grid in each individual square, I like to draw a circle, and then I draw lines coming out of the circle and connect the bottom, basically to make a cylinder. That cylinder is the representation of the locks or the braids, and kind of helps you figure out and map out where you want your locks or braids to be. But yeah, for this particular drawing, I made them locks, so that just means they don't have that braid pattern in them. I don't always draw the entire grid on the head first. I kind of like to see where the grid will be shown. So if I have a picture that I'm looking at for this hairstyle, I kind of will look at where the parts are actually showing in the hairstyle, and then that way I'll just focus on those parts instead of having to draw the entire grid and then possibly not even use it. But you can make your locks long, you can make them kind of fan outward. I personally decided to go with some locks that fanned outward, kind of like if they were in ponytails. But this is pretty much how the locks would look if I drew them a little bit longer. And I still kind of made them fan out a tiny bit, but not as much as the short ones. You also don't have to make them straight. You can kind of make them more organic, curvy shapes, because locks are not always super uniform. So that's something else to experiment with. And then for the ends, I kind of like to add these just curvy pieces. Similar to the curly hair, I just add in like little coils and little curls just to finish off the ends. And that just gives it a little bit more of a natural look. So I accidentally forgot to film what I was doing, and I'm basically just gonna show it over again. So I have to erase at least half of it for you guys to see. But you already see me create the parts and everything. So now I'm gonna show how I shaded it. So I lightly shade everything in, and then from there I like to add in these little stripes or just pencil lines over it. So you see I'm lightly shading. And this just gives it some texture. It makes it a little bit more interesting to look at. I'm still working on how I draw locks. I haven't drawn them very often, but I did like how this hairstyle turned out. Out of all the drawings, I think this one is my favorite. But after I finish shading everything, I like to add in these little stray hairs, these little curly loops. Kind of like if you know what butterfly locks look like, I'm kind of thinking of that. But that's also something that's optional, you don't have to do that. And then here I'm kind of showing, this is basically what I do in the front section of the hair. I erase part of the box, and then I go ahead and make these little lines for the roots. And then this just makes the hair look like it's actually coming out of the head. And then after that, I like to make sure I shade in the box parts. And then I try to make sure that they're a little bit closer together. And then after that, I like to erase these circles at the top of the parts. But this is pretty much how everything looks all together. But here we are at the next two hairstyles. So this hairstyle is twists, and they're up in two pigtails and down in the back. So a half up, half down type of situation. And then the other hairstyle will be wavy hair. For the twists, I essentially kind of made these geometric shapes on the top to mimic ponytails, and then for the bottom it was kind of just sort of like triangles again, and then for the outline of the wavy hair it was a bob shape. But that's pretty much what the two outlines look like. Now I'm going ahead and adding in the sections for the twists. I pretty much use the same sectioning method as I do for the locks, which are just these little cylinders. And then I like to add these little stripes across the cylinders and kind of curve out the outsides of them to make it look like twists. Now, making twists is kind of difficult. They kind of end up looking like curls if you don't make your sections closer together and more uniform in shape and size. So I kind of varied my shapes, and my twists look a little bit more, I guess you could say, asymmetric, which is fine. Some people's twists actually look more like individual ringlet curls, so I decided to leave it. For the top of the hair, since the hair is pulled back, I kind of made these triangular sections at the top, and this just kind of makes it look like the hair is being pulled in the direction of those ponytails, and that just makes it a little bit more believable. Then I decided to add some baby hairs, and now it's on to the wavy hair. So for the wavy hair, this is pretty much the shape that I was going for each strand in each section. So it's the same thing as the curly hair. I just went around adding in these slightly waved sections and some face framing pieces until I was happy with how everything looked. We are finally into the shading part of both of these hairstyles. So starting with the twist, I tried to shade around the little sections that I create, and the look that I was going for was kind of like this picture that I seen on Pinterest. You can kind of see how the twists look and how the light hits them, but I don't really like how this ended up looking. I like the sketch alone. And then on top of that, I decided to kind of, with the flat brush, shade in the twists. I decided to keep this in here anyways, just in case any part of this was sort of helpful. But now we are back to the wavy hair. So again, the same as the straight hair, I pretty much just do the pencil stroke method and just make things more rendered, more 3D, and a bit darker. So some areas I kind of just started off lightly, and then I slowly darkened certain parts of it, basically again where the hair kind of bends inward. I really like how the wavy hair turned out. This is actually my first time doing it. But yes, this is how everything turned out, these two hairstyles and the ones from before. I hope this video was helpful in some way, or at least interesting. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.